Are you trying to figure out how to get things done? Are you trying to look for knowledge that can actually help you do something, be better at what you do? Hi, I'm Joyce Mbaya, founder of ZD, where we provide affordable online courses for Africa. This is the place for you, the ZD podcast, where we have inspiring conversations with amazing people. And the ultimate goal is to help you know more so you can do more.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Know More, Do More podcast. This week, I'm your host, Kevin Kabingu. Subbing in for Boniface, and this week it's going to be a good one, an interesting one, something different, something most of you haven't, maybe I'm pretty sure haven't heard, because I've seen the stats on these people's page, website. So I'll stop mumbling a lot and introduce these two amazing people that I'm going to talk to this afternoon. Please, ladies, introduce yourselves.
Great. Thanks, Kevin, for having me here. I've never been on a podcast, so I'm really excited about it. My name is Catherine Wanjiko. I am the Program and Impact Coordinator at Lugha Ishara. So I don't know if you guys have heard of Lugha Ishara before. Or let me first introduce myself, then we'll come back as to who Lugha Ishara is. So I'm not, is it called jumping the gun or something? Yeah. So I am the Program and Impact Coordinator at Lugha Ishara.
Yeah, my name is Anne Kigo. I am the Communications, Marketing and PR at Lugha Ishara. And I'm glad to be talking about what we have on ZD and why we're doing what we're doing and what's the impact or the envisioned impact of even having our classes on ZD. Yeah.
Amazing, wonderful. So, Kate, as you were saying, could you please take us and explain to us what Lugha Ishara is, what you guys do, how you guys started, all that.
Wow. I'll start with who Lugha Ishara is, and then Anne will take it up from there. Maybe Anne can do the products we have, or we'll see how to do it. But so Lugha Ishara is a social enterprise, meaning that we are a startup in that brings together education of deaf children, technology, and disability inclusion or deaf inclusion. So inclusion is where you accommodate persons with disabilities. So you make changes in your behavior, in your area, or in your documents, practically anything that, because disabled people do live with us and they're part of our community. So inclusion is where you make adjustments or accommodations so that the person with a disability who is, for one reason or another, cannot access something, could it be maybe a document or information or content. So for example, what you'll do with a podcast like this one is transcribe it so that the notes or the transcription notes are available to those who are hearing impaired. I hope that's something you have that you often do. So that's what inclusion is, creating accessibility for people with disabilities. So for us, we focus on the deaf child because the deaf child is easily left behind, or rather deaf people. Excuse me, I have a bit of a cold. So deaf children are easily left behind because deafness in itself is silent. So because of the communication challenges or the added communication barrier in that you have to use sign language, and not everybody is able or willing even to learn sign language, that excludes deaf children on a different layer as compared to other disabilities. So at Lugha Ishara, what we do is we work with the parents, providing psychosocial support. That is really vital when you are dealing with any intervention service, whether it's for deaf children, autistic children. All parents need that psychosocial support. Psychosocial support can include peer-to-peer learning, where you learn among parents, what are you doing? How are you doing this? How are you coping with the other? Or it can also be expert-led, where you have somebody who is an expert on a certain topic come and teach or equip the parents with practical skills. Then we work, of course, directly with the children. This means that we create a learning environment that is inclusive and accessible to the children. What do I mean by inclusive? Inclusive, accessible, and child-friendly. Inclusive, I mean that we use sign language in our classes. We have a sign language interpreter. We encourage our staff to learn sign language, and we encourage the family that surrounds the deaf child to learn sign language as well. That's inclusion. Accessible in that we are based out of Gertrude's Children's Hospital. It's at the moment it's not a paid service, so deaf children are able to access it for free. So that means it's accessible in terms of socioeconomic status, and child-friendly because there's a lot of sign language content on YouTube or on other platforms, but it's not child-friendly. A child will not sit there and just copy what it is you're doing without engaging them fully. You have to not go down, it's not really going down, but you have to be at their level of understanding and attentiveness for them to be able to learn. You have to work with their pace. You also have to be patient, as you would be with any other child. So that's how we do that. That's the methodology that we use in a nutshell. Yeah, and so we also have other products. I know I'm digressing from the point of ZD classes, but we do have other products. So I'll take two, and then and Kigo can take the rest. So we have the Talent Academy, we have the Hangout Hub. So these are the areas in which deaf children or families of deaf children can connect with us. There's the Hangout Hub, the Talent Academy, the Inclusion Clubs, and we have our newest product, which is the home-based comprehensive care. So therefore, I'll take you through two. I'll take you through the home-based comprehensive care and the Hangout Hub. Then Anne will take you through the Talent Academy and the Inclusion Clubs. So the home-based comprehensive care is where we are looking to intervene, early intervention and detection of hearing loss in deaf children. So what you want to do is detect and intervene children or to children. I don't know the grammar, please don't come for my grammar, but intervene where a child has been diagnosed with deafness early enough. So we want to get to these children as early as 6 months, so that then we provide them with the intervention services that they need for them to be ready for learning or to be ready for school. And the reason why that is important, you may be wondering, okay, but why is that important? It's because the brain, I'm not getting technical, I'm not a doctor, but there is the vital language learning years, which is between, is it the age of 0 to 5? Yeah, they say those are the most, like World Health Organization will say those are the 1,000 most important days that they frame the foundation of a child's learning, whether in university or future learning. So it's based on those days. So it's really important that a child is exposed to, and note this word, like meaningful exposure to language, so that the child is exposed to language as early as possible. So at the age of 0, by the time you're born, you see all that googling and gagaing that moms do with children. That's communication, and deaf children don't get that. So, and that affects their brains in ways that is not reversible, and that affects how they learn, that affects their cognition. Yeah, so it's that, in a nutshell, that's called language deprivation. So that's what we're trying to sort of intervene to, so that these children are just as ready for school as any other child. Because what happens currently is, even if you're screened early enough, there's often nowhere to go where you can learn sign language as a parent, or you have sign language therapy or a sign language intervention. Yeah, so a lot of the time, and then you can get hearing aids as well, as is also one of the intervention, but sometimes that's out of reach financially for a lot of families. So we are asking the question then, what happens to these families who are the majority, who cannot afford that hearing aid or another device also called a cochlear implant, which is also very expensive. So that's what we are aiming to do with that home-based comprehensive care. And it's called home-based because it will be done at home, away from clinical settings. There'll be a time for clinical settings and a time for home settings. And as well, there will also be, and also it's called home because it will be highly individualized to the family strengths. So that's one product. The other product is the Hangout Hub. So the Hangout Hub is what has currently been there. It's been existing. We were meeting every Saturdays. So it's a physical space where parents can come for the psychosocial support I was talking about. So I've spoken a lot. I'll hand it over to Anne to take you through the Talent Academy and the inclusion clubs.
Yeah, before we go to Anne, there's something I wanted to ask. At what stage, as a parent, do I maybe detect that my kid maybe might be deaf? What are the signs I should be looking out for?
Oh, amazing question. Yeah. So ideally, you should be screened at birth. Every child should be screened at birth for hearing loss. But one of the things you should look out for is, of course, responding to sounds. I should mention at this point, I am a mom to a deaf child, so I'll give my own experience. And maybe, so one thing that I noticed was that my child will stare a lot at lights. So he'll really focus on lights. Even at the end, that was around the age of 4 months. So he'll turn to a light, and once he could move his neck, he could turn to a light and really stare at it. So in my thinking, I thought that was autism, but maybe in hindsight, it could be that was the sense that was easily accessible to him because he couldn't hear then. So the visual sense is what was accessible to him. And so that's why he was very drawn to lights. Another thing was that he would not respond to my voice. You know, the way like you leave for work when you're done with your maternity leave and you come back and I'll hear mom saying that, when I'm at the gate or they hear me call out, they immediately start crying. So I didn't have that. So these are not absolutes. I'm not saying if your child is not responding to you or is staring at lights, then there's something wrong. I'm just saying then that should, make you more vigilant. Another thing was, yeah?
I was saying you should want to get it checked or something.
You should want to get it checked. Yeah. So, just walk into a clinic or a hospital and say, I think there's something wrong with my child. They'll send you to a doctor. As well, there's also that book, the book where when you get a baby, there's the book you're given with the vaccines. It has a page where it helps you mark your milestones. So you can use that as well. So another thing is that they'll not take to noisy toys, like those squeaky shoes that kids really love. Of course, that's when they're older, but in my case, it was a rattle. He did not understand what a rattle is supposed to do, and that just made me so, it raised I became now hypervigilant, and I was like, for sure, something is wrong. Yeah, then of course, now as they get older, they'll not be responding to their name, and they will not. One more thing is that they will have a consistent babble, but without consonants. I don't know if that makes sense. What I mean by that is children, the babbling is what children do, ba, baby, bob, that kind of talk when they don't have any real words. So you should watch out so that it's not just one vowel like or o, like, so it should have ma, ba, ka, da, like that. Yeah, because to develop those vowels, those consonants, like those consonant sounds, you have to be able to hear them. Yeah, but to develop vowel sounds, you can look at somebody's mouth and just be able to mimic. So those are just some of the things you can look out for. Those are some of the things that I look back now and see then he had a problem. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, I'm learning a lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you said Anne will take us through
the two other products that we have, which is the Talent Academy and the Inclusion Clubs.
Yeah. So the Talent Academy and the Inclusion Clubs. Where do I start? The Talent Academy I would have to start from the Hangout Hub, just a little back to the Hangout Hub, and say that deaf children need a community where they can thrive, so to speak. And for them to thrive, they need to be able to communicate. Communication is, or rather language, it's the currency of life. If you cannot communicate, life cannot really move on. Somehow you need to communicate. And this is how then we recognize, children's talents, because you can see what they're doing. You can ask them, you're able to expose them to different things. And if deaf children cannot access what you are exposing them to, or what you're telling them to do, or what you're asking them, then they will not thrive, which means that even their talents shall not be identified. So then the Hangout Hub helps us to take children to Talent Academy, so to speak, to promote them to Talent Academy. Because when you give them that environment in Hangout Hub, then we are aware that so-and-so draws very well, so-and-so is a very good orator, so-and-so. Like you should meet a young boy called Fadhili. He is like this tiny. Okay, you can't see, but he's very small, and the guy is an MC. Like, yeah. And you see, if he wasn't in that kind of environment of Hangout Hub, then we wouldn't know that this is the kind of guy who should take over during ceremonies and tell people what to do, and and then we wouldn't know where to place them when we have some drama to do. So then the Hangout Hub helps us, be able to place them in different roles and just help them thrive in their talents, because they are talented. The only difference is they speak a different language. So what Talent Academy then does is basically what it does even for hearing children. It's only we're calling it Talent Academy because there's a name for it within Lugha Ishara. But in schools, for example, you have a drama club, you have skating, you have art club where they draw and they paint and what have you. That is exactly what Talent Academy is in Lugha Ishara. So do you have any question regarding that, or can I go on and tell you about inclusion clubs?
No, it's just I think it's an amazing thing. I didn't really have any question about it. I understand that part of finding a community and not feeling alone or at the other, if that makes sense. You have a community of like-minded people. So you, like you said, they open up, and I think that's a very good thing, especially for them. Yeah, I think you can continue with the next one.
Okay, thank you. So, inclusion clubs touch my heart a lot because I have an experience. So when the first time I took my children with me to Hangout Hub, which was one of the first times, it was really in my early stages of attending Hangout Hub. And I went with my children, and I had tried to mention about deaf children because I knew they were going to interact with deaf children, and I knew there was probably going to be culture shock. And then that particular day, I asked them a question, which was it was supposed to be kind of like an experiment, like what will these children really say? But then still the reality of the answers that I got hit me harder than was intended for an experiment. So I told them, we're going to meet deaf children. I told you deaf children? And they answered, yeah, they don't hear. Okay. So what do you think will happen? And then my 6-year-old started to sound confused. It's like even her, she hadn't really envisioned, okay, I meet people who can't hear me, then what happens? And she's only 6. And then at this point, I think she's the only one who had the patience to try and, process. And I told her, what do you do when you meet other children? We play. Mm-hmm. So are you going to play with the deaf children? She said, yes. It sounded obvious. And then I told her, okay, so how are you going to play? I don't know, we're going to play. And then she stopped in her tracks and asked me, so when I tell these children, like when I make a friend and then I tell her, pass the ball, she won't hear me.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, exactly, that's it. They won't hear you. If I would say it in the easy language you were talking, it was like, hata ukimwambia kupatilie ball, hatasikia. Kaniambia sasa alafu tutafanya nini? I was like, yeah, that's why I'm asking, so because we have to figure it out, because then what will happen? And then she told me, then we just won't play with them.
Yeah.
And boom.
Yeah.
And that is reality.
Yeah.
That is exclusion, raw and real. That my daughter cannot speak sign language. So when she goes and meets them, and she doesn't, because like in her mind, even if there is a language that these people you're telling me about speak, I can't speak it. So how are we even going to, how are we going to interact if we can't talk? Raw reality of exclusion. And
and I'm remembering even us growing up, because we had a deaf kid in our neighborhood, and he used to be excluded in a lot of things, because if you're playing football, you have to, it's a communication thing. So you'll shout, if he's in front of you, you can't shout at him to maybe pass the ball back, things like that. So, and because we are boys and we're always up to mischief, if you're going to do something mischievous, you need that one guy to shout, kuna kujua, or something like that, so you can run away. So I think once we went with him and he was caught with this guy, we were stealing wood from his friends, but he took him to his mom. So a lot of times you'd find we'd exclude him because we're like, tukienda mali hatuwezi kuambia nini utashikwa. But exactly. Even we couldn't tell him that. Yeah, so I see it. Yeah, I must have felt very lonely. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So it's first of all, it's there was that tinge of guilt of I really need to do something really fast. Yes, I know I'm doing something about making not only me but even my children become champions of inclusion. But I was like, man, we need to do something bigger and faster, because I can only imagine what then deaf children are going through. I was thinking right now, yes, we're going to Hangout Hub, and if my children decide they won't, actually my children are the ones who have often felt excluded now at Hangout Hub, because most of the children there are deaf, and they are so to speak, yapping in sign language all over. And my daughters are like, yo, we don't know what these people are saying. But then now the opposite. This is because it's Hangout Hub where they have come together. And we've spoken to many of them, and in the hood, it's a different ball game where you don't have children who are speaking their language and they are alone. Then that is exactly what happens. Like you're saying, we can't play with this guy because the game will become slow, or we can't go, stealing with this guy because he won't even hear when we are screaming And it sounds funny, but you can imagine what these children go through. Basically, that means they are ripped off a childhood. And then now, what happens is, of course, what we go through in our early childhood affects, how we grow up and how we interact with life later. So all of this, of course, plays into them as they grow up, being excluded. And now, even as adults, there's still that exclusion, because that is not to say that just because someone is an adult, then they are okay being excluded. No, it's still painful. It still feels, bad. I mean, even now when we are adults, if you found out that clique of friends that you go out with, just suddenly you organized a gig and they didn't call you, you'll feel excluded, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So this whole exclusion thing, by the way, it's bad, and it has a very bad effect on the lives of these children. And the fact is, people sometimes think, it's just a few. If it's one in the neighborhood, the next one is in, I don't know, then why should we, go all the way to help just a small number? But the truth is, there is 466 million people that have hearing disability in the world. 34 million of those are children. And only 2% of the 34 million receive education in sign language. So if you do your math, first of all, generally, 98% of the deaf children in the world do not receive education in sign language. So they just struggle through life. These are the people that end up, some of them, I imagine, and I don't know if you've walked along Tomboya and there's this guy who sells stuff. He has a stall, a roadside between the real shops and the street. And I realized, unless he's learned now, but a few years ago I realized what he speaks is not really sign language, because he probably just struggled through life and learned to communicate somehow. So then that means, so he can't speak to us who are hearing people. And then when he's put in a setting where deaf people are speaking sign language, he still is not able to fit in. And on top of that, he probably was not educated because there was no language to educate him. You get?
Excluded everywhere. And that's so
exactly.
sad. Yeah.
It's that sad.
And
so you can imagine.
I don't even think about it. A lot of us just go on in life not thinking about these things.
We don't. In fact, what we do is zuba at these deaf people when we meet them like they are like we are in a zoo.
Yeah.
I'm trying to be like they are monuments. These are real human beings who are good human. Like the only difference is the difference should not even be the disability. It's the language that we speak. Because they are able to use language. It's not the language that I speak. And it's a language that we can learn. And all these stories, by the way, about that inclusion clubs. Forget the fancy word inclusion clubs. And just get the point of, that's why we have that, to include. That's why we have classes on ZD, for example, so that people can learn sign language. Because even if we have the kids at Hangout Hub, when they go back home, and in the hood, they don't have people who know sign language, then, there's only so much we have done, right?
Yeah.
So inclusion clubs is about basically getting the community around deaf people to include deaf people by learning sign language. And it's not hard. I'm sure right now, if Kevin, you were told that there's a job in China waiting for you and you'll be paid just $1 per month, right? And all you need is, because you have a good degree, you have everything else, but you don't have the Chinese language, and you need to fit in, you need to learn Chinese. I am sure you will look for the best college. Yeah, so people are learning Chinese, people are learning French is even taught as a basic subject in some schools, Language is just another language. Mm. Yeah, so in the spirit of inclusion, that's why we have those inclusion clubs. We have classes on ZD, we have Zoom classes, we have corporate packages, so that if, for example, in your company, you embrace this inclusion matter, then we can train people in your company with sign language. And of course, it has all of it, and it can be really hard, but for example, on ZD, we start with the very basics, A, B, C, D, and then we go to words, common words, breakfast items, mother, sister, family members, the same. We learn English and every other language. And then we go to, more complex things, sentences and what have you. And for example, in the corporate inclusion clubs, when we train, then we customize the curriculum to fit your corporate. For instance, if you're a bank, you might need a different set of vocabulary at a certain level than, for example, a hotel, right? Yeah, hotels will be more interested in all types of food, and a bank will need to know what is a check, what is a signature, and what have you. And we customize all of that. But it starts with just be interested in including, because nobody is usually prepared for disability, right? In fact, statistics have it that the 95% of deaf children are born to hearing parents. And that's why we have HBCC, what Kate spoke about, because the parents are shocked. They are, what now do we do with this one? And then, leave alone, what do we do? Me, myself, I'm in shock. I am blaming myself. I'm wondering what I did wrong. I'm wondering, do I pray? Pasi has said, do we pray? When I go home, they have said, kuna mbuzi kuchinjwa ya sijui gukaya nani wa anko ya nani wa inlo nani tuchinje hiyo. Yeah. A lot of confusion. That's why we have HBCC, so that as the parent goes through this confusion, as we help the parent go through this confusion, we are also helping the child learn a language, even as we seek other intervention measures, so that this child does not go over the window period, the language acquisition period of 0 to 5 years. And then that part of their brain that's supposed to get language shrinks. And then that child will have a problem getting language to begin with. And then you expect them to understand chemistry like the others. And then when they don't understand chemistry like the others, we say deaf children are dumb. They are not.
Yeah. It's true. No, I did not even consider that other aspect of the social stigma on the parent as well. Them thinking that maybe nilikosea mahali, I did, the families and all that. But there's so much like pressure on this, and again, it's things I never even think about people go through out here. Interesting.
I'm sure Catherine was saying the same maybe 5 years before she had to parent a deaf child. Yeah. Catherine.
Yes. Let me tell you
about.
Yeah, let me tell you, by the way, before I had my child was the first, by the way, and this is going to sound very ignorant, but my child was the first disabled person I encountered. Outside of people in my family using a walking stick out of old age,
ouch,
I had no experience with disability. And so even when I first learned that he's deaf, I was like, okay, we need to fix this thing. Okay, so what does it need? Because I used to hear unaenda unaosha masikio. So I was like, yeah, his ears will be washed, he'll be fine. Then what? That is not possible. That's not what we are talking about here. Here we are talking it's permanent. And then now I started doing the work of really learning about what it means to be disabled and what deafness is, what exclusion is, what inclusion is. So I wasn't born or I'm a better person than the common Kenyan this just came to me naturally. No, it didn't. I had to do a lot of the work because I was there was no, first of all, didn't have a choice. But yeah, I had to do the work to just learn what it means to be excluded, and to first understand that and realize that my son will face some tough times that I will not be able to protect him from. But what I can do is be a better person for the other deaf people or for the other disabled people that I will encounter. And so that's how I wound up in Lugha Ishara, just doing what it is that I do now, which I love. Because it's based out of a personal experience, a personal pain. And I can hear Kevin, I think I can almost hear the cogs turning in your brain as you start to realize just how deeply entrenched the stigma is.
Yeah.
So it's a lot. So if I was in your shoes, or rather if I was in your young Kevin's shoes, and you have this deaf child that you have in your hood, and so for example, just thinking about where you are going to steal. Why were you stealing wood in the first place?
Okay, we grew up in Umoja, and why we used to steal wood is because the mama mandazis would pay us for the wood.
Oh, okay,
yeah.
Okay.
So you needed a guy for looking out, and as you guys are just so taking out someone's fence or something.
Oh, okay, I get you. I was really trying to understand why you were stealing wood. Okay, yeah. So maybe at that time, what I'll do, of course, I'll not as a child. As a child, you're just thinking this person is a great inconvenience. But one way, I always say, if you just nasiko ubaya, but if you think a little, you will know how to include this person, because then he could have been the lookout. Maybe he's not the one stealing the wood with you, but you can just tell him to make, like, akiona mtu akikuja, do something, throw stones, hit a can or something, because they can do that. Like, that's really easy to understand. You don't need to have so many sentences said or so many words to tell somebody. If you see somebody coming, then make noise, or what I'm trying to say is, if you just, find a way to include that person in whatever whatever you're doing, because that, I'm not saying you get people into doing wrong things, but at that point, that was your childhood. Those were the games you used to play. So find a way to include that person. And it's really not hard. It's just that we have this mental block with disability where we think it's all about, it's going to inconvenience me or it's going to be expensive. But really, we just think about it, you'll realize there are so many ways to support somebody or to make somebody feel included.
Even now I'm feeling bad. I should look for that guy.
The guilt inakushika sasa.
Yeah.
No, but really, what guilt? Well, guilt is a good feeling. It's the starting point. But what we want is change. Like, now, what next? Like, maybe you can go back to your childhood, but what happens next when you meet the next deaf person, or the next person with a disability? What will you do then?
Yeah. My mind now is as Kate is saying, the cogs are turning. I'm seeing it every day. Also, there's another question I wanted to ask: is sign language the language itself, is it universal? Like, if I'm studying Kenyan sign language, can I use it in another country?
Okay, we'll check. Then no, sign language is not universal. Just recently we attended a conference, the Enable conference. The Africa is called Africa Inclusive Africa Conference. about 1 or 2 months ago. And I remember, so there was a lot of people with, especially many people with disabilities of different kinds. And we met a guy from Ethiopia on one of the breaks, during tea break. That's when we mingle, And then, of course, now with, somehow people that can talk sign language, you just get to, identify each other. And we were chatting outside. Then we were actually with Nancy. Nancy, yeah? The co-founder.
Yeah.
And at some point, it got frustrating. Because we realized, this guy from Ethiopia, we had thought maybe because, we're just around here, Africa, Ethiopia is just up a Jew.
Yeah.
Maybe a lot of things should merge. Like maybe major things will differ, but whoa, we realized it's also so different. So no, sign language is, it's not universal. There is, for example, what we have on ZD is Kenyan Sign Language. We have American Sign Language, for example, and this is actually the next layer. We are still at what would I call it? We are still way down here when it comes to inclusion, so to speak. We are trying, yes, but we are still at the point where so many of us have not even embraced just learning Kenyan Sign Language. And then the next layer will be making these children competitive on a global scale. And that would mean that, let me put it this way, because this is how I usually put it. And this is a little into the future. This is the ideal world, the way that I see it. So my child, who is, I have a 2-year-old. My 2-year-old speaks ile language. Tunaijua ile ya huyu chokoza mimi.
Yeah.
Huyu enda hapa. Okay. Mimi taka kikombe. So it's very basic communication. And Kenyan Sign Language is not far from that. It's not very far from that because it's not signed exact English. There is signed exact English, which is not even American Sign Language. You get? So signed exact English would be there. I am coming. You sign I, you sign am, you sign coming as it is.
Or you sign the letters.
Yes, every word as it is. So the localized, so to speak, sign languages, that's not what they do. So the ideal situation that I'm speaking about is where, while my 2-year-old is doing the basics, being able to communicate in such a way that when she says I am coming, she does not say all the 3 words. She says Mimi kuja, and I understand. So the ideal situation is a deaf child her age is also speaking Kenyan Sign Language. And then at the point where now my 2-year-old goes to school at say 3.5 years, and they learn to say not Mimi kuja, it is either I am coming or Mimi nina. Is it ninaja ama ninakuja ama ninasija?
Ina depend tu na pale ulizaliwa.
Exactly. Mimi ninakuja. Yes. Mimi ninataka chakula, not Mimi taka food, So at the point where my hearing child is learning now to say the full sentence as is, the ideal situation, and I believe that it is coming, is the deaf child who's been doing Kenyan Sign Language can also graduate to signed exact English. And I want to believe that in every other country, that's the ideal situation coming in the near future. So that when a deaf child from Kenya is called to a university in, I don't know, the US, London, they don't have to go and learn American Sign Language, for example, Yeah. Because that's like telling the American to come in Kenya and then they have to learn Kiswahili in order to to school, for example. No. Kiswahili is just, kuweza kuongea na wase wa mtaa. And that is what should happen, even with deaf children. A deaf child in America, when they come to Kenya, they should be able to communicate with a Kenyan deaf child. And then they will only go to the level of learning Kenyan sign language. Ndio waweze kuinteract sasa vizuri, because ugali, there isn't sign language for ugali na uko maju, Yeah. We have Kisumu, we have Mombasa, we have signs for all of that. Uko hakuna. But you get that ideal that I'm talking about. And it answers your question, right? So no, it's not universal. And the other disadvantage we have then is a lot of education. You remember that I've told you 98% of the 34 million deaf children are not educated in sign language. They don't get access to education in sign language, right?
Yeah.
And then even the ones, for example, in Kenya who are educated in sign language, at the top there, and we had spoken with a prof of Nairobi University, or the University of Nairobi. Sorry. The University of Nairobi, called Professor Rumo. He's the, correct me if I'm wrong, he's the first deaf prof, Eastern Central Africa.
The first?
Yeah, I think that Yeah, you could Google Professor Ndurumo after this and then decide whether you'll put that part of it or not, or you edit it out if I'm wrong. But yeah, and he admitted to us that yes, he's a prof, but uko juu, he struggled as he advanced in his education because education has not been developed in Kenyan Sign Language. So the vocabulary becomes very limited. By the time you're doing your master's and you're doing a thesis and you need to communicate, so those technical things, the psychologies, are many fields. At that level, there isn't Kenyan Sign Language for it.
Yeah.
So your Kenyan Sign Language becomes very limited. You're not able to cover much. But yeah, but like him, he overcame. Now he speaks. He not speaks signs. He signs fluently in Kenyan Sign Language, and he signs fluently in signed exact English. Like we interacted with that guy, and we're like, "Whoa, yani where?" Na akitaka ana switch to. You see the way Wakikuyu wengine they speak Kikuyu from Nyeri and then the Kirinyaga, they just
yes, I understand
exact.
Yeah.
And that's why we want our deaf children to be not to be limited. Yeah.
And I'm sure he has like the strongest will to go through all that to push and get to where he is. That takes a lot.
Well, we have not even spoken about Professor Ndurumo. He was brought up in the times when there was no high school you could go to if you're deaf, because akukwa sasa hata na hizi special schools that we have one in Isinya, we have one up Aga Khan, we have one, they want. So for him, his fate was sealed. Kimaliza class 8 ni hivyo.
I need to hear his story.
Yes.
It would be a very interesting one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I think as we are wrapping up, maybe I'll ask, apart from Zip, because you guys talk about using technology a lot, apart from like having like the courses on ZD, is there anything else you guys use technology for?
We've done animations before, but this is not something I will talk about a lot because of something good. Because the reason we have paused on the animations for now is because at the beginning, that much use of technology we thought was solving the problem, so to speak. But then again, of course, we were in quite an experimental stage. And then we developed something. And then when it was brought to the children, to the users, they were not as interested as we thought. Yeah. Yes.
What was that?
Sorry?
Why was that? Did you guys like?
That's because what they are looking for is not to sit in front of a TV and watch some. What was that character's name? That name keeps on disappearing. My children confuse me with these cartoon names. Kate, the character was called Wadi.
Yeah, it was Wadi.
Wadi, yes. I'm going to say something like Elsa or something. Yeah, Wadi. Well, you have not stayed with small girls, then you will know Elsa and Sophia and Wadi, and you can't tell the difference. So we realized that what the kids want is not to sit and watch Wadi speak and go shopping and blah 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 blah. Their pain was a different pain. They needed belonging. They needed real people. These children, you should meet them at Hangout Hub. They are excited. They are like some of them when they close school, those who've gone to boarding, they are like on their parents' phones and contacting Kate and Nancy and the other person and asking them, when are we coming to Lugha Ishara? When are we coming to Hangout Hub? So clearly, there wasn't need to continue to spend, our time and resources on technology, not because it is not necessary, but because then we needed to move a step back and start addressing it from hapo nyuma kidogo, Yeah. So with time, we've not thrown away the idea of especially animations and any other technology that will come our way. Technology is, there's a lot of products out here. There are apps for calling a sign language interpreter on demand. There is one we've met the one with with a way to tell deaf people when there's an alarm on the door. So yes, there is a lot of space for innovation in technology, and those are not things that we are saying we shall not do. It's only that at this point in time, we are sorting it out from the pain points of our users, so to speak. And the parents also, what the parents needed apparently was not to see that their child is watching a cartoon in sign language. Clearly, the parents also had a big pain, They needed to come and meet other parents who are going through this. They needed to be told it is well. They needed to be told your child can learn sign language. They needed to be told, yes, as we wait for the hearing aid, as we wait to see if we can get a cochlear implant, we can do this. So those are the things we are sorting, even as we continue to look into the future.
Wow. I think my mind has been opened, plus blown. And it's got me thinking about all these things. I think things you take for granted, the people you overlook and never think about how it might be affecting them. Just even the way you're saying the kids want to come from boarding and want to hang out with other kids. So it's an amazing job you guys are doing. Incredible. And listeners, I think you should take something from this, even if it's just going on ZD, learn those ABCs and 1, 2, 3, just something that maybe will be useful to you as you interact with deaf people. Be more compassionate with them. Yeah. And I don't know, unless Kate has something else to add, that's going to be the podcast.
No, really, but thank you for having me. And I really encourage all your listeners to be more inclusive. There is room for inclusion in everything that you're doing, whether you work as a hairdresser, whether you are a mama mboga, whether you incorporate. Please remember to use your power, your able-bodied power, because as an able-bodied person, you have some power and privilege. Remember to use your privilege as an able-bodied person to seek inclusion for those who are disabled. So just look out for inclusion opportunities. And if you're in doubt, please consult Google, or you can also reach out to Lugha Ishara should you want more specific insights.
share like contacts or anything?
If anyone needs any help with even the ZD classes, or like Kate has said, as they seek inclusion, sometimes the ZD classes can fail to be enough. In fact, they are not enough. Start there. We have a lady right now who started a club, so to speak, and that's the other way you can do it. Kevin, don't struggle alone. Get a few friends, become accountable to each other, start these lessons. So she got her friend on board, and now they've done the ZD classes, and then they got in touch with us for a teacher who comes in person, just to polish. And then now the next thing we're looking at with these two ladies is immersion. And what we mean by immersion is you think you've really learned a lot until you're thrown into a community of deaf people, and then you realize, well, you are not able to answer them as fast as you want. So that's usually a very important step. So for all of this, I believe you'd like to get in touch with us, because we do know where we can send you to go and immerse yourself in that situation, in that environment where you learn and where, your mind is really opened on a very different level. You might also want to reach out to us because you have a deaf child, or someone who has a deaf child, and you feel that they will benefit from getting in touch with us for Hangout Hub for the HBCC. You might also want to get in touch with us because you want to start an inclusion club. We'll help you set that up, be it in a school, be it in a corporate. Yeah, so my number is 0703 180 345. And like Kevin, you said, it's info@lughaishara.org.
Asanteni sana, and I hope the listeners, you've gained something from this. So until next time, this has been the No More Do More podcast. Kwaherini.
This week's episode has come to an end, but the fun doesn't have to stop here. If you have any questions, suggestions, or feedback, head over right now to Twitter and Facebook and like and share, comment, get involved. Let us know what you think, what you want to learn next, and join us next time.